The theme of this session will be Chinese international students in U.S. campus. Our three presenters. Andrea Zhou, a PhD student in St. Louis University. So she will be talking about how to attract international students to the campus, how to support them, and how to retain them. Professor Wang Xueying from the Theology Department of Loyola University Chicago, and she will be talking about bridging Catholicism and Confucianism, a comparative theological perspective in theology course. Jordan Qiao, and she's a graduate student. First, she went to College of St. Benedict, and after 2 years, she transferred to Loyola University Chicago, and then she went to Northwestern University.
Before I start, I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience and how I get into this field because this is very interesting and also related to some later contents. I myself is a Chinese for sure, coming from a non-Catholic family background, very traditional Chinese background. Go through Gaokao, went to college, graduated, then there was a turning point that I joined the Beijing Center after I graduated. It's very coincidence actually. It's unexpected. I just went to jump into a job interview, and they just hired me. I didn't know why actually at that time. I didn't know that job at that time, but they hired me. So I went to the Beijing Center, worked for first 2 years. They liked me a lot, I guess, because they sent me back to Loyola University Chicago for a study in 2012. That's the time I met Father Michael at Loyola University Chicago, and that trip is actually helped me to gain the first key to my future career. What that key is, that's a connection. So Father Michael actually invited me to the Jesuit community at Loyola Chicago. Then I went there. I was so shocked by what I see and what happened there in their community because that's my first time to learn that the group of the priests are living together, working together, sharing everything. They share their spaces, they share cars, they don't have salary donated to the whole community. What's that? That's communism. That's my feeling. That's my feeling because I expressed, I went through the whole Chinese education. I learned communism for so many years. And they said it's a utopia, it's not exist. That's what we're looking for. That's we're working to get into that direction. But when I went to that Jesuit community, that's communism. So that's my feeling. At the first time, I feel like, oh, there's a strong connections actually between Catholic and China in a really positive way. So after that trip, I came back to the Beijing Center, served them for next 5 years as a student affairs professional. Then I started to learn more and more about Jesuit education. Then I kind of get interested in the Jesuit education concept. Then I found the second key. What's the key? It's the connections between Jesuit education and Chinese education. Because Jesuit education is always talking about whole person education, well-rounded education. They serve the world, they serve students to make sure they grow up from all perspectives. What's that in Chinese? That's exactly the philosophy of the highest philosophy of the Chinese education. That's 素质教育. That's all around education in China. That's what the Ministry of Education in China is always talking about for years. That's the second connections. So I feel like there are so many connections between China and the Catholic, and especially the Catholic education. And I truly believe that Catholic education is actually a perfect fit for Chinese students for many years. That's why in 2017 I relocated. So I went to United States, I started to serve St. Louis University for all international students. I am now full-time staff for Into St. Louis University, serving international students as well as PhD students. As just Rosie I mentioned, I joined the SLU's PhD program last year for higher education administration. My interest field is actually thinking about how Catholic university as a whole, or this concept, how this concept can attract more Chinese students in the future. No matter if it's a way we can go into China to establish a true university, or how we can marketing ourselves among Chinese people to show our face, to show our mission, to show how we educate students. In this way, we can attract more Chinese students to us. So this is my goal, and this is probably my dissertation in next few years. So that's me. Because of all of this background, Father Michael actually invited me to talk about recruitment trends in China. Before I get into any details, I just want to mention every time when I'm talking about data, so when I'm talking about numbers, data, those are all official data that must be issued by any government departments or their reports. Because of that, all of the data, when data says Chinese students, it means Chinese students from mainland China. But when I'm talking about my best practice, when I'm thinking about Chinese students, when I talk with the Chinese students, I'm actually talking about a broader concept, which is students who speak Chinese. That's a much broader concept that's including students from mainland China, including students from Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, and many American Chinese students. So that's a little bit broader concept, but I think all of these are very useful for us to understand this population because they share a lot of same experiences. I'm talking about recruitment. I put this map here. It's a more international way to think about the recruitment because Chinese students is a part of the international student population. From data shows every 3 international students, 1 of them are Chinese. Okay, so before we are thinking about how to attract Chinese students, we think about this question. I kind of go through this survey talking about top 3 negative facts that affect international enrollments. That's for all international students. Can you guess what are they?
Safety.
Financial, safety, what else? Location?
Politics.
Yes. So I'll say the number 1 is actually political environment. So how friendly the political environment is really impact international students their choices. Because when international students are choosing a school, they are facing a lot of options. They can go to United States, they can go to Australia, UK, or Canada. They have a lot of options. So political environment is actually the very first thing they are thinking about. So that explains how during Trump period, when China-U.S. relationship collapsed during that time, when everyone is talking about Chinese international students are stealing American science information. During that time, that's not a good time for us to attract any Chinese students, right? So what's second? Student visa policy. So that's something very surprising for me actually, but I think it's also understandable. So I kind of think about this before and after COVID because that's totally different world. Before COVID, everyone is thinking about can I secure my visa? For Chinese students, mainly they are thinking about do I have money? Can I explain to the Chinese embassy that I will come back after my study. So that's the two main questions they want to answer. During that time, I think from the school I serve, St. Louis University, I see like most, like the number of students who fail to get a visa to come to United States actually are very, very small. So if they really want to study in United States, the majority of them can secure a visa. But after COVID, especially during Trump administration, there are a lot of things going on. One of them are Proclaim 10043. This is a policy actually issued last I think it's called President Order, issued last May, are talking about there are certain graduate Chinese students are not able to get a U.S. visa. So those students are usually connected with certain Chinese universities that are related with military background. So, for example, right now I have a student are impacted by this policy now. I have a student who studied online for almost a year. Now he is trying to get a visa because he studied in Beijing 航空大学. That's a military background Chinese university. He couldn't get visa. He got visa denied earlier. And there is no way probably he could come to United States. It's such a pity. I think the policy is that only 2% students will be impacted by this policy, but even 2%, we're taught because the student population are really huge. Even 2% impact a lot of students, families, and universities. Also, administrative processing is something else students are experiencing constantly. That means when you submit your visa, they won't, usually the process is when you submit your passport to get a visa, it takes 3 days for you to get everything back, right? This AP process is a pending process. Basically, they will say, we need to check your information further. It takes up to 180 days for you to get your passport back. So what that mean? It's basically at least a delay of their study, but I see many students that went through AP process never get their visa. So more and more students are involved in this issue as well. Third thing is also thinking about major sensitivity. It's also kind of related back to the Proclaim 10043 on some majors that became very sensitive. So if you're a PhD student in biotech now, no, you cannot get a visa. So that's a major sensitivity. The last one I mentioned here about visa is the ability to study online in United States, because that was an issue last May during COVID, because all schools are having online classes. But according to visa policy, if students are coming to United States to study, they have to take in-person classes. So there was a conflict at that time because schools are not offering in-person classes. But for the visa regulation, they have to take in-person classes or they have to leave the country. So at that time, many schools actually they united together and kind of against this visa policy, and they actually canceled that policy quickly after like 2 months ish. But during that period, I recall that like many students were panic because there's no flights go back to China, and they are not allowed to study online, and they are not allowed to stay in United States. Where are they going to go? Nowhere. So many students are like really panicked during that time. So the third one is actually work eligibility in the United States. Only 20% Chinese students will work after they graduate. That's the data from last year, only 20%. But even this 20% students, even if they just stay in United States for 1 year for an internship or even a volunteer, this is still very important for them. CPT is something they can do internship during their study. OPT is 1 year or 3 years study after they get their degree. So actually very few Chinese students, it's fewer and fewer now, will actually use this work eligibility to work in United States. But compared to Canada and Australia, those countries are much more generous to international students for giving them work eligibility or even long-term permanent residence to work for their country. Compared to them, this policy is actually quite strict for international students. Also, I also mentioned here to apply for a work eligibility takes up to 6 months in the past. During COVID, it's 9 months. What that means? So if I'm a graduate student, after I finish year one, I need to think about to apply for my work eligibility, or I couldn't get one when I graduate. It's insane. Also, if students are able to work and the company are actually giving them H-1B visa, it also for Chinese, they have to go through a lottery system first. Only 1/3 of students will get a visa. 2/3 of them couldn't get visa. They have to go, and even if they're go into a green card process, it takes 6 to 10 years. So the whole process is actually very exhausting. So many students just chose to go home because that's easier. Yeah. So after I talk about 3 negative effects, now I want to show this graph quickly. As actually they showed this a little bit earlier. 2020 this is for all international students. 2020 is definitely a turning point because you see after 13 consecutive years of increasing, we see a decrease now. For the data, a total number still remain high for all international students, over 1 million. Chinese students, 1/3, as I mentioned. But this group of students representing 5.5 of the student population in United States. And 75% of them are degree seeking. There are some numbers are always being mentioned in our field, international education field. One of them is every 7 international students created 3 jobs. Every 7 international students created 3 jobs. The other one is even more. Wow, it's 5.5 students. There's data in public school, 5.5 international students contributed to 35% of their tuition. 5.5 contributed to 35%. We're talking about China. This is the data for China. We see it's still increasing, but dropped a little bit in 2020. But remember, this is the enrollment trend for all students from first year, second year, third year to graduate student, everyone. What I'm more interested actually is about the new student enrollment. Because we want to see what's going on from the COVID. Like one data I see, Civis, which is a system to issue student visas, they released this report said 2020 there is a 72% decline in new student enrollments in 2019-20. That's a 72 decline. And in China, the student visa issued to Chinese students in that academic year decreased 99%. I was so shocked by this number. When I looked at this number, I was so shocked. But the good thing is the visa services now resume in this March, and the news report says they issued 60% more visa to students than 2019 same period. They compared 2019, not 2020, because they closed the embassy in 2020. So they issue more student visa this year than in the past, but still like a year's decrease in 99%. How long will it take for us to catch up? So that's something I'm actually even more interested in the future to look into our data in new student enrollment that will be released in November. Um, so because of this, I talked with many agents and a marketing person earlier. Um, Many of them said it will be a buyer market in China. A lot of them saying that we will not recruit Chinese students as we did in the past. It will never be the same. It's quite similar as COVID. Many people are thinking when COVID will gone, can we go back to our normal life? There probably will no more life in the future. Similar to this one, we probably will never recruit Chinese students as what we did before. They will never come back. It could be the situation considering those top three negative reasons I mentioned: political, visa, work eligibility. None of those are easy to change, right? As an educator, when I see those three reasons, I feel sad because none of them are in our control. It's all out of control. Like I have no ability to urge United States to issue visa to that student who already studied online for a year. I have no ability to urge United States to give students more ability to work after graduation as an educator. The only thing I can do is try to build a better university, provide better services, but because of those three reasons, students wouldn't choose to come to United States. So that's really, really sad, actually. Also, we'll see more competitions between countries. This is already showing up actually in this season, in this recruitment season, because because of COVID, the students started to say, okay, I shouldn't go to UK because COVID there is a disaster, but should I go to United States? Is United States better? Not necessary, right? So the country competition just started to become more and more competition between countries. Also, I see more and more competitions between schools, especially for scholarship. I think this year, even though I only see a small number of agents, but I do have connections with many agents who's working in United States, who's working for Chinese students to come to United States, right? So I see this year, 2020, this 21, this recruitment season, I see the biggest scholarship I've ever seen in my career. So usually, like prior to the COVID, probably student will get like $2,000 per year to $5,000. That's already a quite generous scholarship for Chinese students in the past. That's what the market look like. But this year, I see more and more schools are giving students $50,000 scholarship. The reason why I discussed this with one of my coworkers earlier, the reason why is probably, especially during COVID, some university are having seats. They have a lot of like empty seats that they want to fill. They don't really care if you're American students or international students or Chinese students, as long as you can pay the tuition, fill the seats, come. We'll give you whatever we can give to support you. But because of this, the scholarships are increasing for many students. Now students can compare their offers to say, okay, Fordham University gives me 10,000 pass. I'll go to St. Louis University who gives me 20,000. But I don't think this type of competition is that necessary, especially for our Catholic school as a whole. Like, we don't really want to compete each other in this way, right? We want to compete each other to say student will say, okay, I like this program better. I think this school fits me better. I'll go to this school instead of having students compare to say, okay, this school is cheaper. They give me more scholarship. I'll go to this school. I personally don't think that's a good way to compete with each other. Although sadly, I see this happening more and more. Um, Lastly, I think COVID is something we have to consider in higher education because it's already changed our life, changed the whole education scenarios. Thinking about the visa, I still have students who's going to a third country to get their visa because their embassy is closed. Thinking about their travel processes, they have to have more stops. The flights are more expensive, and also they're exposed to COVID to study in United States. It's pretty hard. Yeah, I uh, I think it's harder than you can think. Actually, I have so many students and parents are talking to me every day and asking me, how was the COVID up there in United States? So what are you feeling? Can you go out safely? Like, they are always asking me these questions, which I will talk about this afternoon, about those some silly questions, but those are their real concerns. So because of this concern, these reasons, many of them are thinking we probably couldn't really recruit Chinese students as we did in the past. But still, China, as we have such a big population, the needs are still there. We will still have good number of Chinese students coming to United States to study. It just takes some time for them to getting back to those numbers we want to see. That's why I also mentioned the retention here, because it's more important for us to think about how we can retain those students who are already in our university. It's more important for us to think about what we can do to support those students are already in our scope, right? Instead of thinking, oh, come, new students are always coming. That's probably a different strategy for us to think about. This afternoon, I'll talk a little bit more about services and support and the cost for recruitment and retention. But I'll just stop here for now. Thank you so much.
After Andrea recruits students from China, somebody has to teach them theology, and that's my job. I'm a lecturer of theology at Loyola University Chicago, and an important part of my job is to teach the theology courses that every student is required to take. And in the recent years, I have encountered more and more Chinese students in the classrooms, and they often have a very hard time with the required theology classes. So today I'm just sharing, some reflection with you about how to teach these classes, and especially I would like to share a theology course that I designed with the particular needs of Chinese students in mind. And the title of the course is Bridging Confucianism and Catholicism. It's meant to be taught at the 100 level. So in our university, students are required to take 2 theology classes as part of a liberal arts core program, one at the 100 level and the other 200 level. So for 100 level is Introduction to Theology. So everybody has to take this class. And 200 level courses, students have more options. They can choose to take a course on the Bible, on church history, on even like world religions such as Buddhism, etc., Islam. And all that is possible. So I have heard from many Chinese students that they find the Theo 100 course to be very difficult. So unless students are already Christian, prior to their arrival in the United States, they were not exposed to Christian culture, imagery, and vocabulary in China. Many of them reported that they had never seen the Bible. before they came to the United States. And although American students also tend to know less and less in the recent years, less and less about Christian theology, but just by living here, they see churches on the roadside. They read about, like what bad things has happened usually in the Christian church in the newspapers. And usually they have some Christian neighbors, some friends, and that would tell them a little bit about Christianity. So this is a disparity, and it creates unfair disadvantages for the Chinese students. And meanwhile, faculty members also find it extremely challenging to teach these students from China who don't have any previous knowledge about Christianity. So some colleagues of mine have sent their students to my office hours and asked their students to set up lunch with me and things like that. So through the years, I've thought a lot about how to help these students to pass their, just to be really fundamental to pass these theology classes, and also like to have a good experiences with them. Whether they become Christian or not, we have to find a way to improve their experience when taking a theology class. So that's leave a good impression. And in the keynote talk on Friday, Mr. Yangman mentioned that the Chinese word crisis, 危机, consists of two parts. One part is crisis, and the other is opportunity. So this required Theo 100 course is also an opportunity for a theology teacher like me to connect with the Chinese students. And the first way I thought of was to write a English Chinese glossary for Christian terminology. Okay, so not a bulky theological history dictionary, but just a list of words with Chinese translations. So in my mind, 三位一体 says more than the Trinity to a Chinese student. Even though they might not know what 三位一体 means either, but it just means more, right? It's in their mother tongue. So when I floated this idea with Father Michael, who was a colleague of mine at Loyola at that time, he paused and he said, "No, a better way would be getting them to take your classes. So you should design a course for them." So that's how this course came into being. That was the beginning. So now that was a little bit background of why I designed this course. So now let's get to the course itself. As I already mentioned, it's a 100-level theology class required of all students attending Loyola and probably also all Jesuit universities across the board and many other Catholic universities too. So my alma mater, Notre Dame, where I studied theology, also requires 2 theology courses of all students. So this class is open to all, but has the special aim of attracting 2 groups of students. One group is students from China, and the other group is non-Chinese students who are interested in Chinese language and culture. At my home institution, Loyola University Chicago, both groups are growing rather rapidly, at least during the pre-COVID times. So post-COVID, we'll have to see, especially the Chinese students from China. But at least pre-COVID, like the population of Chinese students have grown a lot. Earlier, Chen Xin was telling me that when he attended Loyola, there were very few Chinese students. Each year, there were roughly 5 or 6 coming in. But now, Loyola is home to 354 Chinese students, and roughly half of them are undergrad. And also, like, we have a program for minors. Like, you can take it as minor for Chinese language and culture. So that program has attracted right now over 150 students. So it's quite something. Like, there should be a lot of interest, like in this course, more interest than just a course called Introduction to Christian Theology. So just like just one particular way of teaching it. The goal of this course is twofold. Main goal is to introduce basic theological teachings of Christianity, and this is, after all, an Introduction to Theology class. And the other is to help students from China and students who have an interest in China to connect with each other. So although my goal differs from my Matteo Ricci, who ultimately aimed at evangelization, I followed Ricci's approach in introducing Christian teachings. Ricci sought to understand Confucianism in its roots and introduce Christianity as a religion that essentially agrees and complements classical Confucianism. through introducing basic realities in Christianity and Confucianism. My course seeks to find, as Li Yearly puts it, similarities within differences and differences with similarities. And secondly, I hope to facilitate the development of friendship between between students. So this is also trying to learn from Matteo Ricci. Being from different cultural backgrounds should not be the barrier to becoming friends. The desire to learn from each other could enrich the relationships between different student groups. So now let's get to the content of the course. I'll keep this very brief because every instructor has their own preferences and strengths. And the beauty of my profession, which is to be a college teacher, is you can pick your own reading materials and methods of teaching. So what I'm trying to do here is just 抛砖引玉. If you have interesting materials and ideas, I would love to hear from you. So I divide this course into 4 units, and the first unit introduces foundations of Confucianism, including the world Confucius lives in, his thoughts and writings, and the thoughts of his eminent disciples, especially Mencius and Xunzi, as well as the later development of Confucianism in the new Confucian thinkers. And the second unit introduces the basic narrative, doctrines, practices of Christianity, with a focus on Catholicism. Obviously, both this unit and the previous unit is a very brief introduction to 2 extremely complex and long-standing traditions. So we have to be extremely selective with regard to what materials, what topics we want to cover. So I think it's very helpful to pick one thread in each unit so that students can have something to hold on to. For Confucianism, I pick self-cultivation. I think that's a theme that runs through the Analects and Mencius and Xunzi and the new Confucians. And for Catholicism or Christianity, I pick the theme of covenant. So most students, including American students, do not know that the word testament in the New Testament, Old Testament, actually means covenant. So, we talk about the covenant that God has made with the Israelites, and also the new covenant of God and the human race in Jesus Christ. And the third unit looks at the historical encounter of Christianity and Confucianism with a focus on the mission of the Society of Jesus in the 16th and 17th century, which laid the foundation of Christian missionary work in the pre-modern world. So I let the students read some chapters on 天主十义, and also from Chinese thinkers such as Xu Guangqi and Yang Tingyun, who were the first generation of Chinese Catholics. So things did not always go smoothly, and probably a lot of us here know that there was also conflicts between the 2 traditions. The most prominent example of conflicts was probably the Chinese rice controversy. So should the Chinese be able to continue to be Chinese, keep some of their cultural practices without losing their Catholic faith? So a lot of Chinese Christians at that time wrote about their own vision of how to be Chinese how to be Catholic without abandoning their Chinese cultural heritage and identity. So, and actually we'll read some the 2nd generation Chinese thinkers as well. They were not as famous as the Xu Guangqi and Yang Tingyun, but their theological thinking was actually more mature and more developed. The 4th unit recapitulates some critical themes in Confucian and Christian dialogue in today's global context, such as a comparison of Tian and Shangdi, and the Confucian Ren, benevolence, and the Christian concept of love, as well as some ethical issues, such as whether filial piety has a place in Christianity. But let me end with a caveat. This course has actually never been taught yet. I wrote the syllabus right before the outbreak of the COVID, and then applications for new courses were all stalled because of the pandemic with the university. But good news is that the university seems to like it, and they even granted me an award for new course development. So hopefully I will be able to teach it soon and report back to you how it goes on the ground. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Jordan. So I will represent the group of students after the teacher. In this presentation, I will be based on my personal experience as an international Chinese students coming to the States from a non-religious background to encountering religion and finally to commit to Catholicism. That's when I finally got baptized, and my journey along with some suggestions and thoughts. So the first encountering. I want to mention actually the entire period took me around 5 to 6 years from I had curiosity about Christianity and finally I got baptized. And I would say this is not a short time, and I believe this timeline can be tremendously shortened if we know how we can offer Chinese students better resources. So my first encountering go back to all the way when I was in China. I was at high school and I traveled a lot. There's one time I went to this city in China and met a mom who's also traveling with her son. So one afternoon, we all were sitting in the backyard of the hotel, and suddenly, out of nowhere, the mother just took out of the Bible and started to talk about the story of Jesus. I just sat there and listened to a story, and I find it's very fascinating. However, this is only out of my pure curiosity because I didn't know anything about this before. And I believe my knowledge about Christianity back then still apply to most Chinese students nowadays. So what's their level of knowledge in Christianity? Almost zero. Now let's ask this question. Is this a good thing or even a bad thing? Before answering this question, let me introduce a little bit historical background, although I know a lot of them are more professional in this field than me. So during the Cultural Revolution, we all know the expression of religious has been severely priced by Chinese government. However, this situation has been loosened up since 1979. So since 1979, some churches and temples have been allowed to operate although under very strict restrictions, and the authorities have grown much more tolerant of religious activities. What does that mean? That means for students or people who born after that year, even now, they've been living in a much more tolerant religious environment. So, although Chinese students don't barely knew anything about Christianity, but they either holding a very neutral or even somehow a little bit positive impression about Christianity. And I think this impression is very important for us, as it really makes Chinese students' curiosity and interest in Christianity possible. And I believe this is really the foundation or the starting point of their following faith-seeking journey. So I would propose here, let's treat China as a fertile land with a lot of potentials. Okay, that's a good start. But also we have to admit that although there's a lot of Chinese students starting to realize, maybe I can become religious, and I'm really curious or interested in this perspective. However, there's no people really there to sow the seeds and water it. There's no people to really there to guide them, just like me. So I had this curiosity when I first time heard the Bible story, but that's it. I didn't even know there's a curiosity hiding in me, and I didn't know what resources I could reach out to, and there's no person who lead me to keep exploring myself. So let's move on to my second encountering. I spent my first 2 years in College of St. Benedict. College of St. Benedict and St. John's University are two closely related private Roman Catholic and higher institutions. And very interesting, since 2008, 2009, there's a very obvious increase in Chinese students in the campus. As you can imagine, so as a Catholic-based college, there must be tons of religious-based organizations or resources in the campus. However, there's none of them Chinese-based. And from my experience, I did take my two religious theology courses there, but that's only because it's the requirement for graduation. And the Chinese education system is very different from universities here in the state, and so I didn't know there's resources out there too in the campus. So with all these nice, good resources lying around campus, how can we help Chinese students and how can we introduce this to them from the very beginning? Let's take a peek of the campus. It's a very pretty campus. I want to talk a little bit about how I feel when I just moved to state. Well, I feel very overwhelmed. Why? First of all, because I'm not a native speaker. Oh yes, I did speak English, but not very fluently. And I just left my home country to a completely new place. And I had zero knowledge about Christianity. Let's think about this a little bit. So we have so many Chinese students coming to the state each year with this super overwhelmed feeling. So how can we help them? And how can we start to introduce the idea of Christianity to them? I would like to offer two suggestions, but of course there are much more possibilities built on this too. The first one is campus tour. So unlike most United States students, Chinese students usually don't have the opportunity to actually see campus until they come to the state and to actually attend university. And also orientation usually is the first step for them to actually explore the campus. And however, orientation is not really focusing on the religion side or the history of the church in the campus. So if there's none, then why don't we create one, right? And I would suggest for this kind of campus tour, it should be either like Chinese language based or Chinese and English language based. And basically, we can focus more on religions and history side of the church, the campus, or even the city. And then, of course, we have to include other areas and also include some different activities, just like usually how orientation goes. And this would be also great opportunity for us to send out the message. The first step is that we can send out the message to menus to introduce other outside class activities they can attend, such as faith group gathering, Bible study group, and social media account, which I will talk in a little bit. So let's move to the next group. So faith group gathering. Okay, we send out all the manuals to students. Some students will be interested and they come to this faith group gathering. And what's this? I want to emphasize this is not a Bible study group because we don't really want to intimidate students from the very beginning. We really want to introduce them the idea gradually so they can have time to digest and hopefully finally accept it. And the main goal for this kind of group, we want to give out impression is that, we want to help students to adapt their new lives in the States. By doing so, we can introduce different resources and opportunities in the campus, and then we can answer their questions. This would be also great social networking opportunities for them, and this can be very appealing for international students as they literally don't have any friends at the moment because they just moved to the States. Of course, and we want to really make this fun if we want to attract young people and international Chinese students. So we have to include various elements such as music, sports activities, like trips to different areas of the city and explore different churches, cathedrals in the city, etc. And so basically, the idea of this group is that we want to form the bond with Chinese students. We want to let them realize, we're here to help. If they have problems, they can reach to us, and we want to build this trust. But also, in the same time, gradually, we can start to talk about what kind of theology courses are available in the campus, what kind of choices they have, and for those students who are more interested to exploring next step, then they can be introduced to the Bible study group. So of course we have all the outside class activities, then how can we skip the theology course itself, right? Because it's really the main way for students to learn about theology systematically. So yeah, just like the professor once just said, the theology courses can be really, really hard and tough for Chinese students. Why? First of all, because they don't have any background knowledge. Second, they're still like adapting the new life and they're still experiencing language barrier. And we also have to admit that the theology courses, most of the time they're lecture based and very serious, can be a little bit boring. And how can we improve this? I would like to offer some of my suggestions. First of all, like use various teaching modes. I need some movies, not those historical documentary, but something more fun, vivid, interacting. I will show an example after this slide for this too. And also teacher can have some conversations with students to learn about their religious background, their knowledge, their level of knowledge, and maybe adjust content a little bit, which I'm glad that I heard about the course like Professor Wang just designed. And also slow down the speech rate a little bit. This is a very, very minor point that a lot of teachers can ignore. But if you have ever learned a second language, you will know the importance of this. For example, for me, I took Spanish class in my college year. So if like for a person who's from Spain or from Mexico, if they speak really fast, I will have a hard time to understand them. However, even if they slow down a little tiny bit, it helps. And also sent out manuals in both Chinese and English with basic introduction of terminologies. And then also some after class theology study group, which can be combined with the teacher's conversation. So for those students who wants to have extra help, we're here to help. Okay, I would like to show you a couple minutes of this video that maybe we can incorporate to our Bible study or theology course. It's called Lego Jesus. Someone like use Lego to create the entire Bible story. And this is the first chapter.
This one will be different. Human beings will be made in our image. They will be like us. They will be able to talk with us and get to know us and be in a relationship with us. We will love them with the same love we have shared forever. And we will go to them and make our home with them.
Let's see. I'll call you cow. And you, I'll call bird. What shall I call you? Grr. I know. I'll call you tiger.
It is not good for the man to be alone. He needs a companion who is like him. He needs a partner. I will make someone who is just right for him.
Whoa. You are beautiful. I will call you woman. Because you are a part of me.
I am putting you in charge of my creation, to take care of the plants and the birds and the animals. All of the trees that produce their own seeds are yours. You can eat as much as you want from any of them. Except for that tree in the middle of the garden, the one that gives knowledge of good and evil. That is not for you.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed it. Actually, I learned about this from my theology course, and I didn't really remember a lot from that theology course, but I still remember this, so this must mean something. Okay. Talking about my third time encountering is from the community. I want to mention how important community is. So Christianity is not only about learning theories or histories, but it is about having a different worldview, like living like Jesus with love. And although I learned about theories from my school, but I won't be able to really experience, comprehend it without experiencing it. So the time I finally got baptized is because I joined this Bible study group hosted in Loyola University campus. And through this campus, I met other people like fathers, sisters, and people who are enjoy having similar background with me, and they connect me to this Chinese church in Chicago area, where I know, oh, okay, so I can actually learn some classes, and then I can get baptized, which I didn't know before. So social networks are very important, like in explaining how people are recruited into the new religions and organizations. Also, it's really this interpersonal bond between the religious group members and potential recruits that plays an essential but crucial role. For Bible study, I only want to offer one little suggestion. The Bible study group I had was nice, but it's pretty casual. It hosted once per 2 weeks. And we all sit together around the table and read the sentence of a Bible and then just talk about our thoughts on it. So which is very nice. However, after my theology course, Bible study was the only way for me to keep learning about Bible and theology. And because I was not a theology major or anything. And when there's a question raised about certain history background for a chapter, there's no people can really answer our questions. So I wish for the Bible study, we really have to have a professor from theology department or someone who's very familiar with theology to be there, so to answer our questions. That would be a tremendous help for us. And next suggestion is a very, very, very generous suggestion. I mean. So we have to embrace technology. As you all know, millennials and Generation Z, we grew up with technologies. This is especially true for Chinese students. Why? Because we come here, we use phone. It's the only way for us to communicate with our family in China and to learn about news in China. And unfortunately, sad story is that younger generation, they read lies about from newspaper, but we still read news from where? From social media platform. And so since we're targeting Chinese students here, I would like to mention Wechat, which I believe most of you have one, and every Chinese students have a Wechat, right? So why don't we use them? And Wechat, I want to also introduce a function in Wechat called Wechat official account. So basically, if you have an organization such as USCCA or even just a Bible study group or your church, you can create an official account on Wechat, and you can have regular posts with different activities there, along with some interesting Bible stories. You can post it every day, and you can ask people to subscribe you, follow you. So yeah, to expand the exposure. And of course, we want to visualize things. So I want to show you an example of how this official account works. Yes, so this is an account I'm following, news account. There's no sound. So if you click into it, you will see they have posts 3 or 4 articles every day. When you click it, You can open the article, just like regular article. You can see the article itself and the title here. Yeah. And if you scroll down, you can see there's like a comment area. People can write different comments. A thumbs up if they want to, or if they don't like it, they can also show dislike. Last but not least, I want to say that we really have to have faith in what we're doing or what we're really achieving too, because good things really takes time. Don't expect young people to come to you, go to them. At the end of Matthew's Gospel, Jesus didn't say, "Oh, attract people to my church so they become disciples." He remarks that he said, "Go and make disciples of all nations." So, yeah, any successful church engagement involves going out to where young people are to really establish relationships with them. So here I would like to say, let's bring the church to them because it's international students. So because it belongs to them too, and we really have to help them realize that. And also, building relationship takes time. The lesson is very simple. Don't expect to grow your church engagement with Chinese students or young people in general overnight. Allow time to form the bond and don't push it. Just be there, show that you have an interest in their lives. And so this would be the first step to take. So in order to better serve Chinese students coming to the state, we should help to lead students when there's curiosity, understand students' needs based on their unique background and personal life teachings accordingly, and complement with some outside class activities. So yeah, there's need out there, then let's lead the way. Thanks for listening to my presentation.